Hey guys, Bob for Bob's Movie Review here.
This is Vincent.
And today we're going to talk to you guys about Interstellar. I put up a review already, just my personal review. If you guys want to see that, we'll put a link in the description. But I want to make a video where we actually talk more intricately about the story and the plot, which are totally different things. The ending, and our thoughts on everything, and like major spoiler alert, we're going to spoil everything about this movie. So if you guys don't want to know, definitely don't watch this video.
Or if you don't care, just keep watching. Either way.
We definitely prefer you keep watching.
Yeah.
Now, to me, I found a lot of things in this movie confusing. It's a super popular movie. I feel it's a little overrated. Everybody seems to love Christopher Nolan so much, and they just...
I'm not on the band. I mean, I'm definitely on the Christopher Nolan bandwagon here, but like, I read a lot of reviews of, like, even myself, a loyal Chris Nolan fanboy. This movie didn't live up to his other movies. This didn't live up to my expectations.
I feel like, but what I'm trying to say is I feel people are overrating it based off Christopher Nolan alone.
So even though they don't like it, their fanboyism is still getting in the way of them really grading how it should be.
I'm not saying they don't like it. I'm just saying they're like, Christopher Nolan, splash! Yeah, it's the greatest movie ever. You know, because I feel like there's a ton of space movies that do a much better job than this in a lot of ways. That you care more about the characters. You know, they have more heart in them, and I'm not putting this down. I'm just saying it fell a little short of what I feel everybody else is giving this movie credit for.
Okay.
So let's just get into it.
Yeah.
I felt like the beginning drags. I don't understand why they needed to spend so much time on the farm, and they could have done that a lot faster.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where they were trying to get in most of their character development. It was to make you care about Matthew McConaughey. He's the main character. You know, you don't really know too much going into this movie. If you watch the trailers, they didn't really reveal much of anything. So,
but I mean, they still could have done it faster.
Yeah,
it was drawn out a little bit. You know, I know they want to go into detail that the Earth is kind of almost dying. It's not dying, but crops are dying. And I mentioned this in my review. They were a little vague exactly on what was going on with the crops, because like everybody was growing corn. And then, what did somebody else grow? Not orca. What was it?
Oh, man.
Can't think of it.
Yeah.
If we think of it, we'll say it.
Yeah.
Another vegetable, and then, like, the blight or whatever took that. And then they're like, but then at one point, then they mention another one. They're like, oh, we still have this and this and this. And it's like, well, what exactly do you have? And I mentioned this also. You never see anybody eat any corn. They act like corn is the only thing. You don't see any livestock, horses. Yeah. Sorry, probably not eating horse. Maybe they will. You know, pigs, chickens, cows. You don't really see any of that. You just see corn everywhere. There's even that 10-minute scene where they're driving forever through corn. Everybody's just growing corn because that's all there is. But you never see anybody eat corn. So it really makes you question what really is left. And so then they establish that education is no longer really important. They don't need they need farmers because they're running out of food. That's the problem. And so they're trying to educate kids to become farmers. Yeah. So you have any more of before the anomalies you want to discuss?
I mean, I kind of agree with you. I'm not really sure exactly, like you said, what they have left. They don't really go into too much detail. I don't even know what year this is set in. Like, they don't say an exact year.
That was something that really, really made me angry, because I wanted to know, when is this? Yeah. Obviously, it's not the past.
Yeah. But it's not too far into the future. Yeah. I think one of the messages here was kind of like, this is what's going to happen if we don't start taking care of our Earth. So I don't think it's too far into the future, but that's just kind of one thing that bugged me, not knowing the exact time frame. Yeah,
I wish they would have just said 2016 or you know, something. They do say at one point Matthew McConaughey was a pilot and he was a engineer, and they also say they no longer have need for pilots or engineers. So we're both under the assumption he's in his 40s, early 40s, mid 40s, late 40s. It's hard to say. In his 40s. So this whole crops thing has to have been within... Just assume it took him at least 25 to become a pilot. Happened in the last 15 years. Mm-hmm. So we could assume it's at least 15 years in the future.
Yeah.
So 2030 at least.
At least, yeah.
But narrowing it down would have been nice, and not that much hard to just put a little text on there. Yeah. Maybe they would have been like, "Oh, that's we want to be more covert. We don't want to we don't want to tell everybody everything. We want them to figure it out on their own." But that's just So his daughter, he has 2 kids.
Yes.
The mom is dead. What? How did she die? Do they say? I can't.
Cancer, I think it was.
Cancer. I don't remember. His daughter notices books falling off the shelf. Who wouldn't notice that? Yeah. And she believes it's a ghost. His dad's like, "Oh, you're just being a stupid kid.
Yeah.
They're just falling off because of the airflow through the window, catching them and knocking them off the shelf."
I mean, you've seen the movie. It gets really bad in the sandstorms that they get. All the dust and stuff that goes in.
But still, it doesn't really make sense. They're just falling off on their own. And then she comes up with, "Oh, they're Morse code because sometimes there's bigger gaps and sometimes there's smaller gaps. That means it's Morse code." And she's like 10. Yeah. Obviously, 10-year-old. I mean, most people are not going to be like, "Oh, Morse code." Morse code's not even really used anymore. Yeah. And then in the future, and they're not probably teaching it in school because they're like, "This is how you grow corn." So, well, her dad probably knows. It just seems unlikely to me to make that jump. And that she would know Morse code. So then, eventually there's a sandstorm, and her dad's like, "It's not Morse code." And he throws a coin up in the air, and it flies to the floor. He's like, "It's gravity." And I'm like, okay, if the gravity is so strong, why can't they tell? It seems like if just certain parts had higher gravity, you'd be like, "Oh God!" You would feel it. It would be more obvious than they made it out to be. So then, by looking at these lines of dirt on the ground, he determines it's binary. Yeah. Now, I have a little bit of background in computer coding, and we kind of looked into it and we discussed it. Basically, what he figures from the binary code is coordinates to a specific spot. Now, if you've ever seen longitude and latitude, it's this huge number. Now, to represent numbers in binary, it's a series of 1s and 0s. So somehow he determined the lines were 1s and the spaces were 0s. I'm not sure. But it was only a small section of the room. Yeah, and you would need, I don't even know, unless it was reading it like a book. He's like, okay, across the floor. It really didn't make any sense. And I thought that was pretty stupid, honestly. So why don't you go ahead and where do the coordinates lead them?
The coordinates led them to pretty far out into the mountains to this secret base that they find out it's a base. They think it's like a military base. They kind of get kidnapped, dragged into there. And
he thinks they're going to be killed.
Yeah, that's what he's pretty scared. They took his daughter away from him. They were both in separate rooms. And then you meet Tars, right? That robot, which I find pretty funny throughout the entire movie. It
was really strange. It would walk, and it was just scissors, kind of. It was a rectangle.
Just walking scissors. And then and after that's where you first meet Anne Hathaway's character. She comes in, and by the way, I thought she did pretty good in the movie as a whole. So did Matthew McConaughey. She walks in, asks him a few questions, basically trying to find out how he found out the coordinates. And of course, he's not really saying because who would believe him, really, And he ends up finding out that it's a NASA base.
One of the guys there was a professor that he knew.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what got him to open up, was the professor. So basically they show him that they have this, the building, I don't know if it was the whole building or part of the building, was basically a ship they were building because they needed to evacuate the people from Earth. Because the sandstorms are getting bad, and they're saying that the dirt and stuff is getting people's lungs, and by their grandchildren's lifespan, people would start dying. And they sent six? Was it 6?
Yeah.
6 astronauts out through this wormhole that showed up by Saturn out of nowhere. And they believe aliens sent it to him. And possibly aliens gave him that message to go there. And just out of coincidence, they were looking for him. Matthew McConaughey, that is. But since there's no, like, I guess no phone service probably, you know, they didn't know how to find him. And because he's like the only pilot left in the world or something. They don't say it that way, but that's, I guess, what's implied. They want him to fly a ship up because they've been getting info back about these different planets on the other side of the wormhole. And they want someone to find a viable planet for humanity to live on. So they have a plan A, which is to fly the building to the planet and save as many people on Earth as they can. Of course, A-list celebrities, Tara Reid,
exactly. Danny Trejo.
And then but then they have a plan B, which is they've got like all these eggs, and I guess they have sperm. I don't know if they said they had sperm. No, they said they had eggs. And they're just going to start over.
Yeah, pretty much.
Personally, and my own feeling is, you know, I wouldn't even go through the trouble. Like, I can understand going through the trouble trying to save people, but like just to be like, oh, humanity has to live on. You know, to me, I personally don't understand that.
Yeah, backing up a little bit, there's 3 different planets. They sent 2 astronauts to each of those planets. A couple of them were sending back signals.
It wasn't 2, it was 1 to each.
Was it?
It was 1 to each. Maybe there was only 3 astronauts, I don't remember, because you don't ever see 2.
No, because they send like a team there. That's why, we'll get into it. But Matt Damon's character, he said that the rest of them didn't survive, so you can assume that there was more than 1 person to each planet.
Okay, we're a little foggy on the details here.
Yeah, but anyways, a couple, was it 2 planets, were sending back signals, so Matthew McConaughey was going to go and explore those 2 planets because they didn't have enough fuel. Or one of them, but they didn't have enough fuel to go to all 3.
Okay, you're jumping ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyways, they tell him that they're close to breaking the formula to get this ship there, which ends up being a lie, and that they're just kind of tricking him to get him to go because he doesn't want to leave his family. His kids are just with their grandpa, and he loves his kids and he doesn't want to leave them behind. But they tell him there's a chance he could save them. So him, Anne Hathaway, and like another guy who I don't know who he is, and another guy.
Yeah, 4.
Two unknowns. They'll probably live, not. So they go up with them, and it takes 2 years to get to Saturn.
Yeah.
And so they get there, they go through the wormhole, and they can't. Once they get through the wormhole, they can't ever send information back. Now, in a way, this made me kind of feel like the wormhole was one way. Like, they could never travel back. They couldn't send communications back. But the problem is that the other astronauts were sending communications back. So, if theirs were coming through, why wouldn't Matthew McConaughey's teams come through? I felt like that was kind of a plot hole. Yeah. Really. They should have been able to communicate. There was no reason why or explanation why they wouldn't be able to communicate. So they get through the wormhole. It's kind of trippy. They come out. The first planet... Now, there's 3 planets they want to go to. One of them, they stopped getting a signal. The first one, they were getting a signal that it was good. Second one, they had been getting a signal it was good, but they stopped signaling. Or the third one. I'm a little foggy on the details, but basically some of them were sending information back, some of them weren't. Now, to me, this was another plot hole. If you think about NASA, I mean, they have probes, they have satellites, they have all this stuff they could send out, and it would just send back information. But it seemed very inconsistent on how the information was being sent back to them. So the first planet is next to they go to the first planet, and it's like right next to a black hole. Now, the whole time Matthew McConaughey plans to go home. He promised his daughter he was going to come home, so he's just trying to get there and get back. It's like, that's the closest one. Slight problem. There is a discrepancy in time dilation.
Yeah.
Is that what they called it?
Yeah, I think so.
The planet, for every hour, is 7 hours on Earth.
7 years.
Every hour is 7 years on Earth. So Matthew McConaughey's like, we'll come around. come at it from the back. The only great thing about high school girls?
What? I
get us older, they stay the same age. So they're just going to quickly go down there because, 1 hour is already 7 years. So they've already been gone 2. So if they're down there for an hour, they'll be gone 9 years. Now, when they get down there, what do they see?
It's just water. The whole planet is just covered in water. And
it's hard to make that assumption.
Well, yeah, it is, but I mean...
That's the assumption that's made.
Yeah.
They don't travel very far, but
yeah,
it's basically a water planet. But only knee-deep water.
Yeah, which is strange.
Unfortunately, because of the pull from the black hole, creates giant tidal waves.
And giant tidal waves is the key.
And that's where we lose a crew member.
Yeah. I don't know who it is.
A named guy.
Yeah.
He probably had a name.
Yeah.
To me, everything about this makes no sense. Mm-hmm. First off, they've been getting information back about this planet. Now, I'm not going to pretend to understand the time dilation. If it's been sending back 10 minutes worth of information, because they assume she just landed, basically, because she's actually crashed and she's dead and her ship is in pieces, but it's all still close, and they say, well, because of the time difference, she really just landed. Mm-hmm. How does that 10 minutes of data correspond to years worth of data back on Earth? It would still be 10 minutes worth of data. Yeah. Either way. So to me that didn't make sense.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Now, another thing. Since she died on impact, there is some sort of computer sending this data back, and it failed to mention that the entire planet was made of water. What is it sending? Is it anything useful?
I think the fact that it has water...
They haven't invented Blu-rays here yet. I wouldn't go here.
I think the fact that it has water at all is a major discovery, because that's what we're trying to look for on planets right now, is water.
It is, but it should have said too much water.
Still, that's just my take on it. Anyway.
Okay, so then they want to get the sensor or something. Mm-hmm. So Anne Hathaway decides to risk her life to get it, and even as the wave's about to kill her, she still doesn't turn around. She grabs it, and Tars has to go save her. And I'm just like, why didn't Tars go get it in the first place? It would have been so much easier, and the other guy wouldn't have died.
Yeah.
Because he died, because even after she gets back on the ship, he's just like...
Yeah, he's just standing there. I didn't get that. He's like, oh my gosh, that's a big wave. I should just
he's
stand
right
here.
at the door, and he's like, oh, I could take one step and be safe, or I could just be like... So, kind of useless death on his part.
Yeah.
So they get back. It's been how many years now?
21 years.
21 or so? I thought it was 23.
Somewhere in between.
Over 20 years.
Over 20 years.
They had left a poor guy back on the ship.
Yeah.
He was up there for over 20 years by himself, not even knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
Again, to them, it had only been 3 hours. Mm-hmm. So it was 21 years, something like that. Yeah. They come back. He's an old guy now. Not a senior citizen, but he's in his 50s, he's 60s. Yeah. I guess that is a senior citizen.
Yeah. Technically.
He's like, oh, I didn't know if you guys were going to come back.
Yeah. I thought you guys were dead.
But he was going to die there waiting.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was a good thing.
I totally forgot about the guy. I didn't even realize that they left him there until they got back. I was like, oh, geez, he's been there the whole time.
Oh, I didn't realize that they had left him far enough away that he wouldn't feel the time difference.
Yeah.
They should have parked closer, I think. It would have worked out better for him. So now they have a tough decision. They have 2 planets left. One was sending good info, but they haven't heard from it in a while. The other one is still sending good info. The first planet is no longer sending data. Mm-hmm. So, to me, I assumed that meant the computer was broken, or the sensor, or whatever they sent was broken. One issue with it is it's still kind of close to the black hole. It's not as close. They're not sure. It could be a little bit of a time dilation. They don't really know what's going to happen. But we find out that Anne Hathaway is in love with the guy on the 3rd planet.
Yep.
So she is pushing to go to that 3rd planet. They don't have enough fuel to go to both. Now, to me, I found this whole fuel shortage thing too convenient. They're supposed to go check out all these planets, and they get to the first planet, they're like, we're out of fuel. What were we thinking? How did they run out of fuel already? There should have been more fuel. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. Because they got back on and they realized they spent much longer on that other planet than they thought they would. So in turn, wasting more fuel.
But that wasn't even their ship.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I guess the outside ship to maintain orbit.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's what they said. I'm not sure exactly the particulars.
I think it was a little too convenient.
Yeah, it still is a little bit, but...
So Matthew McConaughey wants to go to the second planet because that would leave him enough fuel to return to Earth, because he still wants to go to Earth. His kids are now, in their 30s or 20s, because he's got 2 kids, 20s and 30s. And he's like, man, they've already grown up so much, and I'm missing it all. I just want to get back. And Anne Hathaway's all like, oh, the other planet's better, I don't even know that guy that's there. And then he finds out that she's in love with the guy there. So, since I guess he overrides her, they go to the second planet. They get there, and it's like, it was so cool looking. Like, the clouds in the sky were frozen.
Yeah. So.
It was like Ice Planet. And it like crashed into one of them a little bit, and they get down, and it's Matthew McConaughey. No,
Matt Damon. Matt Damon.
It's Matt Damon. It's Matt Damon down there.
I was waiting for Ben Affleck to pop up sometime around there, but it's not.
Didn't happen. So we get down there, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we have to go down a little further, and we can start this colony. Mm-hmm. It's not good here. Just go down a little bit."
Well, they wake him up from cryosleep too. He was in cryosleep the whole time. Right?
Yeah, that's why he had stopped sending data.
Yeah.
To me, again, that doesn't make sense. The first planet, it's just some sort of sensor sending data. And on this planet, he disabled the sensors or something, and they didn't think that was odd. And he was just manually typing out the data, I guess. Oh, it's so cool in here, guys. Should totally come down here. There's a keg. I don't know what he was sending, but...
He was essentially sending false data so that way they could save him.
Because he didn't want to die there.
Yeah.
But it really wasn't inhabitable, because it was all ice.
It was just completely ice.
So he decides to kill Matthew McConaughey.
Or at least try to.
I guess call that an accident.
Yeah.
Get on the ship, tell them to get out of there, go somewhere else. I don't think he had thought it through real well. Basically, let's see. The guy who got left up in the ship, he dies there. The older guy, he gets killed because I guess Matthew McConaughey had set up some sort of bomb if anybody tried to find the real data.
Matt Damon set up a bomb. Yeah.
Did I say Matthew McConaughey again? Yeah. Matt Damon. Which, I don't know. That's at that point, I mean, come on. They found the data, and then you're going to just blow them up?
Yeah.
Like, that goes beyond. And I didn't care for that. So eventually we're down to Matthew McConaughey.
And Anne Hathaway.
Anne Hathaway.
And Tars, still.
And Tars. Mm-hmm. And what are they going to do? They're going to use the black hole somehow to get to the third planet?
Yeah.
Is that what they wanted to do?
Mm-hmm. They were going to do that. Wait, was it?
Were they going to go home, or were they going to go to the planet?
They were going to go to the planet because he ends up sending her to the planet, and then she's like, I thought you said that we can both make it, and he doesn't. Yeah.
So, basically, around this time, Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway find out the whole thing was a lie. The scientist was full of it that he would never find the answer, and they were never going to have a plan A. The whole thing was just a lie to get Matthew McConaughey up there, just so they could take the eggs and everything and start a new humanity. They should have said 2 men and 2 women. Probably would have been more helpful instead of 3 men and 1 woman. 1 woman. But now they're like totally screwed. Matt Damon tried to dock with the ship, and he like blew up half of it. And they're like totally screwed now. And so their plan is to somehow use the black hole to rocket them across, and Tars is going to eject into the black hole, and he's going to send data back to Earth. They're going to use that data to get here. I don't know. I don't get all that. And Matthew McConaughey lies and says he's going to go, but there's not enough fuel to get 2 people, I guess, because the fact that you're weightless in space.
I'm not sure how that whole thing works, but so the plan was for Anne Hathaway was for her and Matthew McConaughey to go both to that third planet and pretty much just hope for the best that there's something there and they come and save them. He ends up separating himself and Tars and just sends her to the planet by herself.
Because he says there's not enough fuel.
There's not enough fuel.
I feel like this is where the movie just completely falls apart, and if it had ended there, I would definitely think this was a better movie. So he ends up going into the black hole, and he's just kind of like floating around for a while, and then it's like his ship's like eject, and I'm like, well, you're gonna die. Why are you getting ejected? Like, go down with the ship like a man.
like his ship is just zooming down.
Well, it's like spinning too.
Yeah, it's like spinning, just zooming down, and it's like just like tearing itself apart.
Yeah.
And then he decides to eject. I'm just like, do you think that's really the best idea right now?
Like, if you were falling from sky in an airplane, and you had no chute, would you just say, I'll jump out? Softer landing that way. No, you'd probably just go down with the plane. Unless there was a chute, then you could eject. Obviously, that plan would not work in space. So he ejects, and what happens? I don't even know. He falls into this tunnel, and it's like everywhere you see bookcases.
Yeah. He just falls into this fifth dimension, is what they call it.
Yeah. Well, they called it like a visual representation of the fifth dimension.
There you go.
So what it ends up being is he can travel through time now to his daughter in different times at his daughter's room. And what does he do? He starts knocking books off, and he sees himself saying, hey, I'm going to go into space. And he's like, don't go. You already know what happened. You're not going to be able to stop yourself from going.
Just watch the whole movie about what happened. To be honest.
Well, he can't actually communicate. He can knock books off the shelf for some reason.
So it turns out that was her ghost.
He was the ghost the whole time.
He was the one knocking books off the shelf.
And I'm not sure they really explained the dust thing. He was just like playing a harp or something. I don't even know. I don't even think they explained it. And then he decided, well, the way to get her to know was to set up Morse code or something in the watch. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what?
His watch that he left behind for her. She puts it on like the shelf or whatever, and he starts like tapping the shelf to make the minute hand do Morse code or something like that.
So somehow whatever Tars, because Tars is there somewhere with him. You don't see it, but he's talking to Tars. Mm-hmm. Whatever information Tars got, they converted it into Morse code, which, imagine this would be many, many infinite books just to write it down.
Like 30 million stacks of paper like this high.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Now they're converting it to Morse code, so now it's like more information than any person could ever process in their life, and they put it all in a watch with the hand just going like this. And she deciphers it, figures out how to get people off of Earth somehow. And then this part too, I found a little confusing. They're just parked outside of Saturn. They haven't gone through the black hole, but somehow he gets back to the Saturn base. They find him or something in space. Mm-hmm. They bring him in, and by now it's been like 100 years, but his daughter's still alive. Probably the most disappointing, really, even scene of the whole movie. He finally gets back. I mean, she's been so mad her whole life. He finally comes back, and she's like, "Oh, hi, Dad. You go. I have my family." She's just like, "Screw you, Dad," but not mad. It's like, what? Let him give you a hug. Why? She's just, as soon as he sees her, she's just like, go. And then so they end up sending him to the planet that Anne Hathaway is at.
He ends up stealing a ship, like he's not supposed to go.
Oh, okay, yeah. And he goes to that planet. Alright, so he steals a ship, and he goes to the planet where Anne Hathaway is. We skipped this, but basically they implied that this whole fifth dimension was a future human race. Presumably the human race that saved themselves by somehow giving him time travel abilities to tell himself in the past, to let him to come to the future to do this. So who invented time travel?
Yeah. They try and do this whole really like mind-blowing like epiphany like ending, and it really doesn't make sense. As much as you want to try and fight it, it just doesn't make sense. It just kind of falls apart. As much as I like this movie, it just does. And that was kind of disappointing to me too.
Yeah, so I felt like there was a lot of stuff that didn't make sense. I felt like there was a lot of plot holes, but I liked it. I thought it was enjoyable.
Yeah, as much as it sounded like we crapped on this movie, like pointing out all the things, I did still really enjoy this movie. Like I haven't bought it yet, but I do intend to buy it on Blu-ray. Definitely give it a second go. But I did enjoy it though.
It's the last 20 minutes or so that are kind of disappointing. I think Just let Matthew McConaughey die in the black hole. End it. It's a better movie. I don't know why, Christopher Nolan seems to like to have these endings where you have to try to interpret them. But to me, it just leaves more questions than answers. And how are you going to interpret that? I don't know.
I think a better ending would have been that Matthew McConaughey goes back into the station and he goes, I think I'm here to pick up a package. And then they go, what's your name? And he goes, Cooper. And he goes, oh, there's nothing here. And he goes, maybe it's under my real name, Robin. And
we'll see you guys next time with the Dark Knight Rises discussion. If you're interested, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow on Facebook, follow on Twitter, and follow on Instagram.